So very good morning. We already have here with us the day for the first session today. So I consider it a privilege and pleasure to Madam Vaishnav Narang on behalf of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, NIT Jalandhar, Department of Management. Professor Vaishnav Narang retired as Professor of Linguistics from JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, after serving in different academic positions for nearly 45 years, as professor for 22 years. During this long tenure as an academic, apart from PhD students, she supervised more than 57 MPhil and 48 PhD dissertations, sponsored by and developed new courses in JNU in some of the current themes in general and applied linguistics. Her main interests include general and applied linguistics, language pedagogy, and brain studies, phonetics, application of phonetic studies and disorder of communication, each domain of speech, of research on human parts, ethics of higher education. These are the areas we taught, which several research project, multi-cognitive research in cognitive neurolinguistics and other related areas. She has published extensively in these areas with 13 books. More than 100 and brought more than 100 presentations in different conferences and seminars held within the country and outside. While in JNU, she was instrumental in setting up Institutional Ethics Review Board, IERB on human participants, and was member secretary IERB for more than 8 years before she retired in 2015. She also helped the university in setting up Linguistic Empowerment Cell, which conducted courses and worked marginalized sections of the society within the university. She was a chief coordinator of LAC for more than 7 years before she retired in 2015. Association with the university as she as bodies such as the University Court, Academic Council, as Dean of the School of Language, Literature and Culture Studies, as Chairperson for the Center for Linguistics and English, Center for Linguistics, Special Center for Sanskrit Studies. Currently, she is a member and advisor in various ethics committees of different institutions in the country, including Apollo Group of Hospitals at Stem Cell Research Ethics, University of Delhi, also a member of the EC for Regular Clinical Research in the South Campus of the University of Delhi. Today, Professor Vaishnav Narang will deliver her expert talk on structure and pragmatics of English language. So, ma'am, we welcome you to the STC, and over to you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to interact with the students. You know, after retirement, it's a bit of a different world for me because it's been a very busy, hectic 45 years. But what is important is that last 10 to 15 years, I also devoted extensively to the linguistic empowerment cell in JNU. And the motivation came from the fact that the students, that, you know, number one, the programs in the universities, and number two, the students and their capabilities. The programs in the universities and the schools until the 80s were all focused on literature. English ka MA, English ka BA honors means you have, literature or a range of, literary texts and all. Language was really incidental to what you learned in literature. And the universities, the students you get in the universities, sometimes they would know literature, sometimes they learn it through translation, but their actual command in English became an issue. So therefore, we needed to have something like empowerment program in addition to whatever language courses we had. So with that in mind, when we proposed to the university, till then the UGC had given, some nominal grant for helping out the people coming from backward areas and all. But that's not sufficient. If your education system is such that there is no focus on language and the entire range of functions that the language performs, and the student has to be good at all of that to become employable in certain business, in the big world, whatever business or corporate houses or science laboratories or technological institutions, wherever, the employability goes down if you don't have command on language. So that linguistic empowerment cell gave me particularly a lot of, it was a learning experience, and I got a lot of insights from there. So that is why I'm here today speaking to people who are aspiring to get into the world of business and management and technology and all of those things. So literature may not be a major interest for some of you. Literature is to acquire language fully. But for us, if the focus is on language, let's look at language per se. Now, the topic of this particular workshop, this particular specific program is very, very ambitious. Let me also share my presentation in the meantime. And yeah. Can you see the slides?
Ma'am, it has not come as of now. Yes, ma'am, it's in the process. Yes, ma'am, it's coming up on the screen.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, it is here.
Okay, fine. Let me make it full view. Full screen. Yeah, well, full screen. No. Okay, so slideshow, right. Is this okay now?
Yes, ma'am, it's okay, but it made full screen bottom.
Sorry?
Full screen. There, I think on your screen, bottom right corner.
Yeah.
An option of full screen. So, if in case that can be clicked, it would be full screen.
I've done this full screen here.
Okay.
But I do. I know.
Okay. It's okay.
So,
no problem.
And can you also, along with the screen, can you also see me if I'm
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. Good. So, let's see. Now, to start with, the title of this workshop, Recent Advances in Technical Communication in Global Business Scenario. I thought about it for a while, for a couple of days, in fact. And then I thought, okay, the keywords here are, number one, technical communication, global communication, and business communication. So these three are the terms, keywords, and that makes it very, very ambitious and very, it's a huge area. So I thought now I have to come down to, something a little more specific. So I thought of these keywords and I thought of defining them So if I want to define technical, I have to think of what is non-technical. Okay, so put it against non-technical. So technical versus non-technical as binary opposition, then suddenly you start seeing some kind of boundaries that, this can be technical and this can be non-technical. Then global versus local. Again, this binary opposition will give you some kind of vague idea of the boundaries. Okay, what is global? Then business communication. What is business communication? It is not always trade. In the local Indian English, वो क्या काम करता है? वो business करता है. That is just, he is a trader. But in the larger context, what we are talking about is business communication, which is non-personal, which is meant for your business of whatever discipline you are pursuing, whatever kind of livelihood you have. And it could be corporate sector, it could be labs, it could be academic institutions, which means it is non-personal. So now to define again go back to the definitions, what we see here is the local and the personal and the non-technical. If we define that, then what is not covered here is our technical, global and business communication. So local, personal, non-technical is our day-to-day communication, which is for our daily exchanges, daily existence, and you can call it, layperson's language. I mean, even if we are highly qualified, we use that layperson's language in our daily existence, and we use formal, official, technical, the discipline-specific language for our professional life. Okay. So the second part here, formal, again defining the local, personal, non-technical is in contrast with formal, impersonal, register-specific. Register is a term from social linguistics, meaning some kind of a discipline-specific, and therefore technical, and something which is understood across regions for a specific domain of business. So all of that makes it something like business language or the language of official communication. So that brings us to the so-called officialese or official communication. So if we want to talk about English, we are not talking about English for our daily existence. We are not talking about English for our informal coffee house chat or something. We are talking about English for professional communications. So therefore, structure and pragmatics of English language use for official communication. This is the title I chose just to narrow it down to a few important aspects of language for official purpose, for official usage. I'm sure under the broad heading that you have for the workshop, you have many other aspects, many other issues to be covered in different lectures. But for the focus of my lecture will be structure of language, English, which is specifically with a focus on professional communications. Then pragmatics of language use, meaning structure is one thing, until and unless you know how to use it, particularly for formal, official business communication. So therefore, pragmatics is important. Unless you know how to use it, the structure is no use. Then the context is official communication. There is no personal communication. But then the question is, are we including the spoken or written or both? So let me see what all we can cover. I propose to cover general introduction to officialese English. Officialese is an accepted term now. Form and function, structure and use. The form, the structure of language, and function is, what I imply by structure and use. Then we also want to talk about, if you want to talk about a domain-specific language, then the vocabulary of that domain becomes very important. Vocabulary building using a thesaurus. Many of the language institutions don't even look at a dictionary or a thesaurus. वो अपने आप लड़के को कुछ ढूंढना है तो जाके देख लेगा, but it's not used as a tool in language teaching. So I'm also focusing on that. And then talking about speech, I am not talking about the entire phonetics and phonology of English, but I would still like to point out a few things about sounds of English which would not, give you a stamp, a local stamp. Okay, this is a person from, North India or South India, or this is an Indian, or this is Chinese, or somebody, from this area and all. That's not good. So you want to have a certain kind of pronunciation which makes you rise above these local influences. So how to speak to be understood globally, that is the issue. So I will just take a few examples about spoken English as to what is it that makes your English sound as Indian English, and what is it, or is there a neutral accent? Is there a neutral kind of a standard which you can stick to? So there is no standard neutral accent, but we can try and get the local influences a little, consciously taken away from your speech, so that you can, sound, without revealing your local identity and so on. So this is what we will cover. We will talk about the officially style. We will talk about some form and function, a little bit about vocabulary, and then how to be understood globally, and not strictly in that order. Okay, so let's quickly start. We have various terms in use. Some of them are really, making fun of the bureaucrats, saying, oh, they will speak bureaucratese or governmentese or officialese English. So the language of the governance, language of the bureaucrats, language of the officialdom. So language of बाबूडम भी कहते हैं बहुत सारे लोग कि ये तो बाबूगिरी है, तो that is the language. But at the same time, this is the language of power, language of authority. You join any business house, any department, anywhere, you have a designation, and that designation, that name defines your seat, your chair, your room, your office, everything about you in that context. Okay, so therefore, it gives you a place in that entire network of business which is happening all around. So you work as per your authority by being appointed to that chair, to sit on that chair. So therefore, language of power, language of authority, language of that particular chair, language of that particular office, that is the officialese that we are talking about. We are not talking about your home language or the language that you would use outside, with friends and so on. But then people also expect, okay, this is the language of the office. So probably it's because that life is very complicated. So probably the language is also very complex, and it has a certain jargon. It has certain codes which we do not understand, and therefore it is very complicated. It is also stereotypical, meaning certain fixed phrases used in a fixed sense, and therefore it's a stereotype. But then we've also had a movement against this complication in language. Complication in language, making it very, very opaque. So we want transparency. If you want transparency, if you want an ethical code for official use, then it has to be transparent. It should be clear to the person who's, communicating in that. So, which means this term is very interesting. All that lot of gobbledygook कुछ नहीं है, बनाया था एक just to show that it's all gobbledygook, which means very complex language. All those words which we don't understand, all those jargons, sometimes unnecessary. So there was a movement against it for plain language. So language for official communication, bureaucratic communications will have the form and function well defined, formal and official in style, but need not be all that technical gobbledygook, which means the technical means the idea, the concept, the machinery, or the semantics of it that you want to express may be technical. But your language is a wonderful tool. Your language can be simple to communicate very complex ideas and thoughts. So therefore, plain language, technical concept, but technical language, these two things are different. You need not always have technical language, meaning very complex language, to show a complex idea. What I'm trying to say is the ideas may be complex, but it is for you to use simple language to, as if you are explaining something in nuclear physics to your old grandmother who has no knowledge of, who knows English but who has no knowledge of nuclear physics. Can you explain that to her? If you can do that in plain language, in a transparent form, then that is technical language. Okay, technical language, but not very difficult language. You're not making things difficult for people. Okay, so plain language movement was all in the 90s, 80s and 90s. Transparency in language is absolutely important, even if it is a legal language or medical language or any other business communication. So here I would like to quote, good ideas can perish under the weight of obscure text, which means all the gobbledygook can obscure the real good ideas as per ST fashion. And bad ideas can survive under the cloak of all that gibberish. So we are not talking about technical language, which is very difficult language. We are talking about simple language, but still good enough for technical sciences and so on. So we expect in such language no vagueness, no ambiguity. There has to be clarity and precision of science, economy of scientific language. Economy in sciences, meaning everything, a very complex process is reduced to one formula. That is economy. Okay. So similarly, the whole idea may be summed up in one definition which has each and every word properly placed. So that is economical language, transparent language, not necessarily very difficult to understand, but the idea underlying may be very complex. So clarity, precision, economy, no vagueness, no ambiguity, that would lead us to certain preferences for certain forms and also certain styles, because you still don't want to be informal and casual in your approach. So therefore style will have to remain formal. Now this is bureaucratic to the core if we are talking about officialese, meaning office communication or any professional communication. Then communication is official, which means from one person to another person. No, that's a myth. It's not a person. It is from one office to another. Okay, the director is talking to an assistant, or director is talking to a registrar, or a deputy director is talking to under secretary, or it is a communication from one office to another, from one official to another, and in the office system, strictly as per office hierarchy, strictly as per office rule book. So which means you and I as persons are not communicating. Okay. If there is anything personal, sir, please sanction this because I think it will be good, for. No. If you're talking about anything, if you bring in any personal reason there, then it becomes unethical and illegal also. Okay, so therefore, in this kind of language, there is no place for personal experiences, nothing personal expected, no place for personal experiences, personal examples, illustrations, no place for personal pronouns, no place for, you know, you, me, I, they, us, you please go and do this. There is no place for such kind of, language. We just have to say this has to be done, this needs to be done, this may be done. So it's impersonal in every possible way. It's only the designation and the place in the official hierarchy that matters. But at the same time, if you are in a business of, let's say, academics, then hierarchy may not be so important. But the experience of the other person you cannot negate. So you expect, okay, I'm presenting my ideas in this format. And if I get the feedback, then, you will communicate about the feedback and the, whatever critical appreciation and so on and so forth. So it is a system. The official communication has to be something like a nameless, faceless system that works with its own language and its own rule book. If it is officially is communication, then as a person, you're not involved. But you as a, one piece somewhere on that chessboard is important. So sociolinguists register of officialese. I mentioned this term register before. Register is the domain-specific language. For example, register of medicine, register of law. I mean, even if you know very good English, sorry, sometimes it's hard to understand the legal language because there are certain terms and the way they are used. You have to understand with the help of an expert in the area. Similarly, if I'm reading a book on political science, then I might need to ask a few things from a political scientist. Okay. So register is that notion. So we are talking about this register of office communication or business communication or officialese. So this is as directed by explicitly stated rules. There is precision, clarity, no ambiguity, and hardly any place for long discourses to explain. No place for anything like personal pronouns, as I mentioned. I, me, my, you, and yours. No place for all of that in your office communication. Also, when you talk about the structure of language, there is hardly any place for direct imperative statement.
Hello?
Yeah?
Hello?
Yes, please.
Sorry, good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, screen is not moving. It shows the first slide only.
My God, why didn't you tell me? I have gone.
Yes.
No, the 10th.
The first slide only.
Ma'am, we thought,
No.
you were deliberately.
No. I've moved almost to 7th slide. Oh no, you should
No, it's just show the first slide only.
No. Sorry, you should have told me earlier. Let me see what is happening here.
I have to make the message on.
Let me see what is happening here.
Right, ma'am. Right. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you for telling me.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
You could have told me a little earlier. Now let me share this again. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think that full view जो किया ना उससे कुछ तो गड़बड़. Let me stick to this window. Let me see. Can you see this?
Yeah, ma'am, definitely.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
okay, and are the slides? Let me see. Is the slide moving now?
Yes, ma'am. It is moving.
It's moving now.
Thank you. Oh, you could have pointed that out earlier. Okay, so this was technical global. I was defining that, and then the structure and pragmatics. What is my title? Then I said what we propose to cover. officialese and all of that. And then bureaucraties, I was defining all of that. Hmm? Is that okay?
Yes,
And
ma'am. Yes.
then we went to the plain language movement, transparency in language. So technical language does not mean it is difficult to understand. Okay. Then bureaucratic to the core, and I was talking about this. Okay, no, anything personal can become unethical in professional life. Okay, then it is impersonal in every possible way. And I talked about the nameless, faceless system that works with its own language and its own rule book. So actually, the transparencies, these slides are important because in a classroom lecture, I can look at you and I know whether you are with me or not. है ना? But in these online lectures, it's more important to have these slides.
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
Yeah. Anyways, so we move on to this social linguists register of officialese, and I talked about something like no personal pronouns in officialese or professional communications. And then the last point that I was talking about was the structures which we hardly ever use in official statements. For example, imperative statements, direct requests and orders. For example, let me go to this. The communication would be as directed by the competent authority. It is hereby notified that. Nobody is saying that I would like to notify to all the stakeholders that the institutions will remain closed in view of, Corona or whatever. But instead of that, the person who is signing that letter is actually referring to the competent authority, meaning his senior, somebody else in the hierarchy, as directed by the competent authority. It is hereby notified. There is no such thing as who is being notified and who is the person signing and who am I, giving you the notice and so on. Similarly, administrative approval by the competent authority is requested. This is a very standard structure in any official communication. We don't say, please give administrative approval for this proposal. Oh, please give क्या है? मतलब imperative कि give this or do this is non-existent in official and professional communications. So the question here is, who is the competent authority? Who is being directed? Who is being notified? And who is seeking whose approval? These persons are not important. It is the authority of that person. The one who signs that office order, the institution will remain closed for 1 month or until further order in view of the pandemic or in view of whatever, So that authority has signed in the file, somewhere in the files. And then the notification is being issued by undersecretary in the government or assistant director or whatever. The label of that person is important. Who is writing? So he will say, I am nobody to tell you that the institution is closed, but I have been directed by my seniors that I have to communicate with you that the offices will remain closed. So this I, me, you is non-existent. You will say economy in language as directed by the competent authority. It is hereby notified. So that is impersonal communication. Okay. So similarly, a word like a note, take a note of it, or writing notes when you talk to your seniors and you are supposed to prepare a draft for that particular document, and then you will take down certain notes. Okay. Or you receive a file and you want to put it up before the senior, again you will need to write certain notes on the file saying that, okay, these are the main points here for the seniors to be considered. So this is how you put up a note. No matter what kind of business you are looking at, this is the official communication between, somebody who is higher in the hierarchy and somebody who is under a certain, a certain level and so on. But from note, we derive a word notice, and from notice, notification. There are subtle differences in these terms because the context demands all those nuances to be taken care of. The moment you say notification, then you come to these verbs, notify, it is notified. Okay, to notify as a verb, it is notified. So all of these are nuances which you don't need in your day-to-day existence, but perhaps in your formal official communications. Similarly, competent authority has nothing to do with the competence of the person, but it is the office and the chair that the person occupies which defines the competence and authorizes that person, so therefore competent authority. So similarly, another word, memorandum or memo. Now these two terms, they acquire a very specific kind of a meaning. When you say the memorandum of understanding between two nations, two organizations, two institutions, memorandum of understanding, MOU was signed between the director of this and the director of that, so and so, or the joint secretary of this state and the joint secretary of another state, or the prime minister of this country and the prime minister of another country. Memorandum of understanding, MOU, is a formal, technical, official document. But memo has come to be used as something like a senior issuing and a memo to the somebody lower in hierarchy, like a reminder or a warning that this kind of a negligence is not expected or something. So that becomes a very different kind of a document. It is a short form of memorandum, but a very different contextual connotations. So similarly, we use the verb, complete, to introduce, to provide, to fail, to arrange, a certain list of verbs. All of these verbs, you will see they are much more frequently used as nouns in these professional communications. Completion of the project. The expected date is this. So what is the expected date for the completion of such and such project or such and such milestones? Nobody will ask you, when will you complete the project? When are you completing the project? So complete as a verb may be much less used than completion as a noun, because that makes the whole situation impersonal. There is no you and I asking questions or seeking information or telling you to finish this project. It is, we are seeking information about the completion of the project for which many people are responsible. Similarly, introduction or provision, such and such provision may be made, or under such and such provision of law, this thing to be done. Okay. Somebody's mic is on. Please switch off your mic.
Yes, ma'am, I have switched it off.
पर और किसी का होगा ना audience.
Yes, ma'am. I have turned it off.
Yeah. And then investigation and utilization, all of these, you find examples like completion expected by this period, or provision may be made for this, investigation is on, investigation may be conducted. All these are, they look like business communications. The moment you make it, please investigate this, then it is like, you are talking to another person. So you two as persons are not important. It is the official communication. So this may be conducted that visibly. Similarly, passivization for all the impersonal communications may please be done urgently. Nobody says in a formal official context, please do it now. Or or please implement it, defer it for now. And this is not the way it is written. We use passive voice, impersonal communication, like maybe implemented, maybe deferred, or it is recommended that, or the committee recommended. Like, so the finance officer may be consulted, approval may be sought. So all of these are, this maybe is not an option. It is actually an order that this has to be done. But using an optative mode maybe is because it is official formal communication. Direct speech to indirect with impersonalization. Again, the director said you must implement the decision of the governing body with immediate effect. Now this kind of a communication, this is only for exercise, language exercise. This kind of communication you will not find in official business communications. You will say the decision of the governing body may please be implemented with immediate effect. The director was quoted. So, or as indicated by the director, as suggested by the director, the decision of the governing body must be implemented within immediate. So that is the kind of language that we will use. I will skip some of these examples and go over to the spoken part. Now the same thing. So far, I have not stated whether this was written or spoken. These were all examples of language as you use in the official communication, mostly written. But to speak, when you speak, how to move from the local to global speech. So in language, there can be local to global language because all of these impersonal kind of communications, they are referring to the larger context, so they can be global. But if I say I and you do this and I will do this, then it is localized. Okay, so we're not talking about that. Now we move over to the spoken language. Is there a need to move from local speech to global speech or global accent or spoken language, which may be understood better in larger context, across regions, across disciplines? So, which means we expect that there are some local influences on spoken English always. Always. It's not just Indian English, it's everywhere, Hong Kong English or Singapore English or Bangkok English, the local accents are definitely there. So, talking about Indian English, is there anything like a neutral, standard spoken Indian English which we should aspire to? Well, theoretically speaking, there is no such thing as standard spoken Indian English which one should aspire to. But of course, if we recognize certain kinds of deviations from the expected pronunciation of English, then those deviations across regions within India can be identified. And what I have in the next few slides is some pronunciations which are certain sounds of English which are pronounced in a different manner, not in the English manner, okay, but they are pronounced differently across the country. I'm not talking about the Assamese English or the Tamil English or Punjabi English or Hindi English. I'm not talking about that. But there are certain kinds of pronunciations which we find across these regions. So I'll pick up only those examples. Let me see. Now, some vowel sounds for practice. For example, if these are the vowels of English, these are the examples of all the vowel sets in English, then you can see sit and seat, hit and heat, sin and seen, pill and peel. That kind of a long and short contrast is not well pronounced across certain regions. Some regions have, sit and seat is almost like somewhere in the middle duration, the duration of the vowel is not so short and not so long, so it is in the middle. And seat and heat and seen and peel, they are pronounced, they sound like the same. So similarly, cook and cool, they are really short and really long vowels in contrast. Book and boon, look and loon. So in some regions, that contrast may be missing. So you have to watch for this and see how it is pronounced in English. Similarly, there are examples of words, like cut, nut, bud, mud. Now, this is a vowel which is notified in phonetic transcription with a wedge. So that's an sound. And that English pronunciation of cut, nut, bud, mud, hut, that is missing or pronounced in varied number of ways across languages. In fact, people confuse it with our, curd, herd, bird, meaning a sound, and a sound. These two sounds are confused across regions in the country. I'm not saying this is Bangla English or Punjabi English or anything, but Indian students have difficulty there. So cut and curd can be similar vowels. I curd it, or I ate curd. So that has to be, consciously practiced the way you hear in English films or in English news as pronounced by many of the television channels. You should watch and observe and speak. So probably you will arrive at some kind of a neutralization of your accent. Similarly, another vowel which is as in examples of set, net, bet, or settle, kettle, fetch, bench. These are the examples which in Hindi we don't have this vowel. So when you write it in Hindi, you put A ki matra to ban jata hai set, net, bait. तो वो तो set तो ना हुआ ना. So that's why, and some people, just to make it correct, they will put two matras on top. So that will become sat, nat, bat. Again, it's not correct. So you just have to learn the correct pronunciation of that in order to have your neutralized accent. Okay. Similarly, the other vowel here, cat, bat, mat, ran. Now we have in Hindi and various other languages, we have a, but it gets diphthongized, I like the yar or maya, shaya. So that diphthong and a vowel somehow get mixed up, but generally we don't have too much of a difficulty in these kinds of words. But the next, caught and bought, all, call, that gets confused with certain other pronunciations in Hindi. Similarly, father, after, archer, probably that is a little bit of, you see various pronunciations, but there seems to be not much confusion between the Indian vowel sound and the English vowel sound so we can manage that. Similarly, another area where diphthongs in English, sometimes in India, we don't even recognize that these are diphthongs. For example, say, clay, rail, jail, all of these are diphthongs. They are a sequence of two vowels, they are diphthongs. A, not in writing, but pronunciation. Please focus on pronunciation. Lake, English pronunciation would be with an A and E, two vowels combined. But Indian pronunciation, it is a straight single vowel. Lake, bake, jail, rail, clay, say. We don't diphthongize it, so therefore it sounds very, very Indian. The flow of language therefore sounds very, very Indian. So these are the things you have to pay attention to and try and, get it right. Similarly, buy and try and try, then boy, ploy. There we don't have much of a difficulty. But look at the fourth row, which is no, low, lower, slow, and low. These are diphthongs. And we don't find in Indian pronunciation, they will just come out with the straight vowel O, like low, lower, slow, blow, and that kind of a pronunciation. So the diphthongs is another area. Then same symbols for stop consonant. Yes, there also we have issues like uh, pin, pen, or pan. The word initial p, t, and k sounds. Word initial is slightly aspirated. So the English pronunciation would be pin or pen or pan. But most of the Indians you will see pin, pen, or pan, like spin or span. Similarly, kin or can. We hardly ever make it more aspirated, because for us the aspirated sound is a separate phoneme in our languages. They are two separate phonemes, so we don't aspirate it. So you have to pay attention to how they are pronounced initially. Okay, so I'll quickly move over to these are also a few more examples of fricatives, then think and thank. These are fricatives. So paying attention to the English pronunciation, not necessarily from English films or English native English speech, but you just watch Indian television or listen to the radio news, and there are some very good articulations, examples of articulations that you see there, and you can stick to those, that kind of a neutral pronunciation. So I'll move on to and then stress on syllables. One more point about spoken language. Present or present. Present, present. The two articulations can bring in two different grammatical categories. Present, if the stress is on the first syllable, then it's a noun. I bought a present. I want to present it to somebody. So that becomes a verb. So even if, English is a stress time language, syllable stress can have grammatical significance, syllable stress can have semantic significance, present, consent, conserve, they can all be nouns or verbs depending on which syllable you stress. So this is what does not happen in Indian languages. In Indian languages, the syllable stress is only for emphasis. If I want to emphasize a certain word, then I stress that word. But the meaning of the word doesn't change. In English, the meaning of the word changes. So that part has to be noted. So this is what I recommend, Cambridge Advanced Learners Dictionary. And let me quickly move over to the dictionary for pronunciation and thesaurus for vocabulary building, because the third section I said will be to cover the vocabulary which is for very, very formal, official, proper communication. So dictionaries we tend to use for finding out the meaning of a word, but one should also look at the dictionary with an idea to get the right kind of pronunciation. So for that, you have to look for the symbols in the first few pages and then learn to pronounce and practice each word consistently, follow those symbols. And symbols may vary across dictionaries, but it doesn't matter. You stick to one dictionary and one set of symbols, it's okay. So, but then sometimes you may get the right word from the dictionary for a certain kind of a meaning, but you will discover very soon that probably the pragmatics of use of that word is not really very explicit in the dictionary. So what do? how do you find out whether this is appropriate for the kind of context in which I'm communicating? Is it appropriate or not? Or is there another word which is more appropriate than this particular word? So then you have to go for a thesaurus, where you will look for the synonyms and see how many words are possible, how many words have similar kind of a meaning. Because the word synonym is very, very deceptive actually. Synonym means, oh, okay, the same meaning. But do we ever have same two words with the same meaning? No, the range of context in which one can be used and not the other. If the entire range of context is restricted, for this word in Hindi, Raat and Ratri, sorry, both the words mean night, but we will say Raat in the common context of daily communication, but we will say Ratri for a different kind of a context. Maybe it is literary language, maybe it is Sanskritized kind of form of communication. It is for a specific purpose, to show that we are talking to this kind of an audience in this kind of a context. That's why I'm using the word Ratri. So similarly, Raat and Ratri cannot be true synonyms. True synonyms with identical meaning probably don't even exist in any language. So you have to, in order to find out the pragmatics of use, you have to go to a thesaurus rather than a dictionary. Okay, so for use, just follow the examples carefully. Thesaurus is great for vocabulary building. And let me close the door. There is some noise. Yeah. So there are no two identical meanings for identical words. So no true synonyms. Pragmatics of use is always important. So the context here is official, formal, business, technical communication. So therefore, you have to find the most appropriate word. So two words or phrases that are identical they may be identical in denotation, like Raat and Ratri, denotation to denote one concept, one idea, or the sense of night. That denotation may be right, but the connotations that the words carry, the frequency of use, the familiarity of use, and contextual appropriateness, all of that makes the two words different. So that's why there are no true synonyms. So for register-specific use, you may want to duplicate an existing term and say, okay, they mean the same thing. Okay, they are the same. But then very quickly you will find the words diverge. They may not diverge in meaning. They may acquire shades of meaning which are slightly different, but they may acquire completely different usage or different application, connotation, level, or all of these. So therefore, the differences will automatically come because language is a living thing. It's not like a dead language. It's not the language of the classics, which is no more spoken anywhere. The spoken language is a living language. Look at the example of, this is a very good example, tidal wave. Use of the term tidal wave for the phenomenon which was not caused by the tides but usually by submarine seismic activity. The word tsunami was borrowed from Japanese in an attempt to describe this phenomenon of submarine seismic activity. Because tidal wave perhaps did not carry that sense. So therefore the sciences borrowed this word and this became a popular word. But then when you look at the dictionary, you will find tsunami in Japanese actually means tidal wave. But in English, now in English, tidal wave and tsunami are two different concepts for us. Tidal wave could be slightly different with probably no reference to all that submarine seismic activity, and tsunami refers to all that activity which leads to all those storms and various kinds of things. So like this, if a new term is created, meaning in English the word tsunami did not exist, it was created, maybe borrowing or borrow and translate or borrow and loan blends and so on and so forth, but over a period of time the two words acquired very different, well-defined semantic domains, well-defined pragmatics of use. Okay, so we are not looking for any two synonyms, we are looking for the alternate expressions and then to choose the most appropriate for your given context, for your context of use. So thesaurus can offer lists of words and phrases which are alternatives and which are alternatives to each other, and which may also compromise for those that might otherwise be overused, and therefore they become redundant and they don't even sound technical and they sound as if they've come from the home language. So you replace them with a word like tsunami. Tidal wave तो normal English का word हो गया, तो इतना जो बड़ा तूफान आया तो उसको रेफर करेंगे tidal wave से, तो you feel that you are undermining the experience of tsunami waves. But when you say it's a tsunami, then all the body language and the context and the way the word is used, that does justice to the event which is before you. Okay, so tidal wave to refer to something like a tsunami therefore becomes redundant and not enough to denote the kind of event that you have before you. So therefore you have tidal wave and tsunami both existing together. Now let me take one example which is a very common layperson's language, take as a verb. But to take, let's see what are the different kinds of usages that we see here. This is from the Oxford thesaurus, and you can refer to that. It's also available online, so you can check any other example and find out what is happening there. Now let's look at this take as a verb. It can mean to understand, I take it for granted, or I take it to be something else, gather or interpret, meaning I took it to be a wolf rather than a stray dog. So I interpreted something differently, right? So I perceived it differently. I apprehend something. So to take can be to deduce, to conclude, to infer, to judge, to deem, assume, suppose, or imagine. Just look at these meanings. I take him to be a fool, or I take it from your expression that you have had some bad news. So these examples of take, they show a range of usages. And then once you have this whole range, then you decide that in this particular context of my official business communication, or maybe scientific communication, or in a technical communication, will I say, I take it to be like this, or if I say, I deduce from this data that, and then you draw your inferences. Or if you want to use impersonal communication, you will say the inferences that can be drawn from the data are the following. You're not saying, I take it to be like that. I think the conclusions are like this. No. What you're saying is the inferences that can be drawn from this data are the following. I deduce the following, if you want to use I. So take as a verb will make the whole communication very informal and perhaps a little casual about your research. You don't want the other person to take it casually. So you will use a word deduce or infer, okay, or I conclude. So that choice of word makes it, makes it appropriate to the context. Okay. Similarly, a bet as a verb can have all those meanings. Encourage, to urge, to instigate, to incite, to provoke, to egg on, to prod or to goad, and then also to aid, to help, to assist. Now all of these meanings, they can have, particularly if it's a legal case, then they can have lots of legal implications. For example, to encourage may be a little positive, but to instigate or incite will be very negative. So your choice of alternative for a word like a bet, your choice will depend on what is your communicative intent, what is your intention, what exactly do you want to communicate. If you want to look at it positively, then you, in the sense of encourage, then perhaps you would use it differently, use the word of encourage. But if you want to use it as instigate, incite, then the context has to be really different. For example, the example given here is the jury found that his wife had abetted him in the murder. Abetment in the crime. So that usage then shows it's very, very context specific. Then, this is how you use it. Then the second meaning can be the countenance, meaning the appearance or approve or support or endorse or to second and to sanction, to condone, and also to further, to advance, to promote, to uphold. So many alternatives are available. By failing to inform on the terrorists, the neighbors abetted the bombing. So in this case, it is, if you do not inform, therefore you seem to be supporting or endorsing. Meaning you second the proposal or you actually endorse the event. So therefore, or you condone the event. So therefore, the choice of the word has really to be context specific. Then abide is another, abolish is another. Okay. So to abolish as a verb, to eliminate, to end, to put an end to terminate, to destroy, to annihilate, to annul, void, to make void. So to annul, to void and make void, this will be more common in the legal language. To terminate or to destroy will be more in the physical sense of, bringing down a certain structure and so on. Or to do away with, or to nullify. Nullify will be something in the form of a rule book. To abolish that law or to nullify that law or to repeal that law. So all of that will be again, either in the legal language or in the language of, or something written communication, which is kind of, which has a validity, certain legal validity, that has to be repealed. Then again, it is abolished or quash. So all of that, it is very, very necessary to choose the right kind of word with the right kind of sense in appropriate to that particular context. So your choice of word has to be dependent on the context. So thesaurus can give you the entire range of things. For example, if you want to use the word, let's say, quash. To abolish is to quash certain rules or eradicate. Then eradicate or quash, if you want to use this word, you want to be doubly sure, then you go to the thesaurus entry of eradicate and find out the synonyms. Does it tell you that it is almost the same as abolish in a given context? So back and forth, you can work on these words and help yourself with the pragmatics of use of a word or an expression or a phrase. Endorsement. Again, another example. Let me choose endowment. Okay. Endowment is one more example, which is, where is it? Okay. So these are all nouns. Endowment as a noun. It can be a grant, a financial grant for aid, subsidy, subvention, allowance, allotment, contribution, donation, gift, present, award. It can also be bequest or inheritance, or it can also be something like dowry in the Indian context. Okay, and the example here is endowment was enough to support for it. There is, somebody's mic is on. Please switch off all your mics. There's a lot of noise, please. Somebody's mic. Okay.
Ma'am, is it still on?
No, not now. But earlier there was a lot of noise. So now it's okay. Then I guess the second meaning can be a gift or a presentation or something bestowed upon someone, or award, awarding, settlement. So the endowment of the grant was approved by the college. So that use of endowment is again different from the endowment as inheritance or bequest. Okay, so like this, you can see the third one, the endowments of a person in the more abstract sense of qualities, talents. The person is gifted, so that's an endowment. Somebody sings wonderfully well, so that's an endowment. Okay? Ability, aptitude, capabilities, So all of that, again, it has to be very, very context specific. And thesaurus is a great source for, finding out the right word. Finance. Finance can be, okay, number one, as a noun, it can be resources in the context of banking, accounting, economics, money management, or business, commerce, financial affairs, okay, or even investment. So Bendick is the officer in charge of finance for the company, meaning the investment of the company or the holding of the company, and so on and so forth. So this can be used very differently, but the second meaning, finances, is more in the sense of capital, the actual money, cash, funds, resources for an organization or whatever, for a person or an organization. So assets, holdings, wealth, and all of that. Have you the finances needed to buy the house? That's an example. Okay, so in the first meaning, it was more important, like Bendick is the officer in charge of finance for the company. So there it's more of the financial affairs of the company or investments in the company. But here it is the actual holding, the finance, the capital, and so on and so forth. And the third one, finance, is as a verb, to finance a project, to fund a project, to invest in a project, to back something, to capitalize something, to subsidize something or pay for it. So that is the third meaning. You can see the range of usages that the word finds in different contexts. So you have to be very, very picky on, which particular word to go for which particular context. Last one was financial as adjective. Financial as adjective. So monetary affairs or pecuniary affairs, fiscal, economic, these are the meanings given here. Okay. Then economical and economy. I have also picked up these examples. Let me pick up just one of these. And I'll not go over the entire list. You can, similarly work on pick on a thesaurus and look at the range of words that you are expected to use in your technical or business communication. So just economical as adjective can be cost effective, can be money saving, unwasteful, but at the same time, with the semicolon, you show more words like cheap, inexpensive, or it is reasonable prices. So you're not going to use something like cheap, inexpensive in a formal official communication. You would rather say it is a money saving device, it is thrifty, or it is very economic, economical, very economical. So in that sense, the choice has to depend on the context. Similarly, the other one is provident, economical as provident or thrifty or sparing, economizing, prudent, conservative. I mean, the whole range is mind-boggling. Which one do you want to use? So then you will start looking at the semantic range that each one of these carries with it, semantic range that each one of these words, cover. And then choose the most appropriate one and thereby making your, presentation as globally acceptable with no such attitudinal or communicative intent showing off in the choice of words. So then the economy is the other word. Prospect and okay, one last word. Plagiarism. Now, plagiarism normally I cover as a full topic in academic writing, but here I've just picked up a word as plagiarism because it is very, very important for any academic training to write down something. So what is plagiarizing? Plagiarism is plagiarizing as a noun, and plagiary, piracy, pirating, and in the most common colloquial language, it is theft, stealing, purloining, copying, or appropriation of something, appropriation of somebody else's stuff and you bring it to your book. That is thievery and appropriation. Infringement, imitation, euphemistic borrowing. So this is not borrowing, euphemistic borrowing. So colloquially, you can say lifting from another book, another article. So the similar example is similarities between the two books could only be explained by plagiarism. So the term plagiarism, do you want to be straight and direct? Say that I notice a lot of plagiarism in this text. Instead of that, if you want to say be polite and businesslike, then you say I feel there is a lot of appropriation in comparison with another text or another model or another theory or so on. So depending on what is your approach and how do you want to communicate this, you will use the appropriate word for it. Okay, so there are more examples of it, but I will end it here. And just to sum up, I will go back to the first, the second, third slide. Let's see. Just to conclude, this is what we propose to cover. Officially is English, what exactly is meant by the business communication as opposed to informal personal communications. Then we talked about structure and use, meaning form and function, and the usage can be very, very specific, very impersonal in the official communications. Then we talked about the choice of vocabulary and using a thesaurus. Then we also talked about a few hints about how to speak to be understood globally, meaning what is local about my speech. If I understand a few things about that, I can, change my speaking habits and then perhaps be understood better globally. So sounds of English with some of these common errors of speech across the country that I pointed out. So, is there a neutral accent? We talked about that. The spoken language, written language, vocabulary, and the structure and the pragmatics of use. So, I hope you will be able to start from there and then go over to the other aspects of business communication and technical communication. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for such an informative talk. And now I'll open up the session for any questions which our participants may have. Participants, if you have a question,
if you
please.
have any questions, we can go over those quickly. Do you have another session after this?
Yes, ma'am. We do have another session, and Madam Tulika Chandra will be speaking on technical communication. Yes, ma'am.
Tulika Chandra did her MPhil and PhD with me. So I'm now professor in Jalandhar. So that's very nice.
Yes.
To hear that.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. So any questions? We can quickly take those questions.
Anybody? Any query?
In the chat box, I can see many people saying thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. It's a wonderful session. Thank you.
Okay, so in that case, ma'am, I think participants have hardly any question at the moment. So, ma'am, we thank you for sharing your vast life experience, talk, and finding time out of your busy schedule and giving us an insight to improvise on the technical aspects of the communication. I hope our participants must have learned, gained, and enriched their learning experience to your lecture, and I hope they will be able to use the lecture notes for improvising their technical communication. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aditya. Thank you. And I do hope the students will be able to use some of these insights into their own context of business communications. Thank you. All the best for your workshop.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. So participants, we will have a 5 minutes break, and after that, Dr. Tulika Chandra from Shivnadra University will be here, and she'll be delivering her lecture on understanding and misunderstanding, cultivating our intercultural interaction. So after a 5 minutes break, I will have Dr. Tulika Chandra here. So please be patient and do wait. Good afternoon, Dr. Chandra. We welcome you to the STC at NIT Jalandhar. Participants, we already have here with us Dr. Tulika Chandra. She is teaching at Shivnadar University. Before I ask her to deliver her expert talk, a brief note on Dr. Tulika Chandra is here. Dr. Tulika Chandra is Associate Professor and former Dean Students Welfare at Shivnadar University. Drawing from her training in linguistics, she creates and implements programs for second language learners. She has designed and taught courses focused on student need analysis. Her publications include books, book chapters, and articles published in journals. She has translated and edited folk tales from Braj language and Hindi into English. Dr. Chandra is an US International Exchange alumni. She's a folklore collector, currently working on 2 active folklore groups. Apart from folklore, she is working on the notion of learner-centered instruction and the role of instructors in classroom. So today, Dr. Tulika Chandra, as I have already said, will deliver her expert talk on understanding and misunderstanding, cultivating intercultural interactions. So welcome, ma'am, over to you.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank you, Dr. Prakash, for inviting me to this platform and letting me share my views on a topic that is very close to my heart, in the sense that communication is something that I really like to share my views and take the views and learn a lot from the others. So first of all, I thank you and your team for inviting me to this platform. And right now you were, I think, listening to Dr. Narang, and she has been my guru. So it's it's an honor to be speaking just after her. And Dr. Prakash, can I share? I've already shared my screen. I don't know whether it's visible.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible. It is visible.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I don't know whether it is I'm not very familiar with Google Meet because we have our classes on MS Teams. So I don't know whether we have to have the computer audio as well, because I've got a very short slide in between. A video.
Okay, I think you can go ahead with the video clip as well, ma'am. Let's see if
All right.
there is any problem. We'll inform you accordingly.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks. All right. So when we are talking about, can you see my screen? It's full screen.
Yes, ma'am. We can see. Yes, ma'am. We can see the screen, but it's not full screen.
It's not full screen.
It's okay. No, it's not full screen. It's okay. No problem, ma'am. You can carry on.
Just a moment. I told you I'm not very familiar with Google Teams, so I'll just take a moment. And then just help me out whether it is now.
Okay, Doctor.
Is it
Dr. Gyan Prakash, can you help ma'am with the?
Is it now visible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
ma'am.
Yeah, these are the visible.
Is it full screen now?
Not yet, ma'am, but it is visible.
Yeah.
So can you help ma'am with putting it on full screen?
Ma'am, you can go for F5 if it is possible.
F5.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Just give me a moment. F5. No, it's not coming.
Okay, it's not working, I think.
No.
Ma'am, bottom right hand side corner is an option. So based on
I'm doing that, but I don't know whether it's coming in or not. Because I think I'll have to close my other screen or what. It says you're presenting, but it's not coming as full screen. So I'll have to literally look at it. You are presenting, it says. So
okay.
Anyway, so these are the challenges that we have for what we call it as the digital platform. And
Ma'am, right now slides are not visible.
slides
Now
are
at the
also not
moment.
visible.
Now it's not visible. Yes, now it's visible.
Okay. Let me check. All right. So I don't know whether it's like functional anymore. So
It's functional.
it's functional and it's not full screen as yet.
Yes. It's
Anyway,
okay, ma'am.
so
No
let's
problem.
begin. Okay, we'll begin then. So when we are talking about the communication, we're talking about something that is understanding. The communication, we're talking about certain aspects that gets misunderstood, and we will be looking into certain aspects that we will be in the due course cultivating it. And all these are happening because we have a platform that is called as intercultural interactions. Now, when we are talking about intercultural interactions, uh, we have been doing this since since we have grown up, and interacting with people leads to all of us are interacting, isn't it, every day? So the things that I'm going to share my views on are nothing something that has come out of somewhere else, but it is in and around us. And maybe many times it will feel that, hey, I know this, so this is what we are going to do. We are just going to look again on certain aspects and feel it and see how good we are at it, or how mindful are we of it. So we are, first of all, let us remind us that it's not speaking only. So if I'm speaking, obviously we all know that if I'm talking or I'm speaking, I'm not even bothered to know whether my speech has reached this receiver or not. I'm not bothered about that, isn't it? But what I am bothered about right now is that if I'm using the term communication, that it is a business, isn't it? So we're talking about a business that is, if I send, it better be received by the receiver. And that is something that is known as communication, that I think we all know. So I'll just have a kind of that an example. Just start off with an example of mine. So we were in Chennai and we had to catch a bus. This was a long time back when I was studying, and we had gone to Chennai for a project. And when we went over there, so we noted. So we were taking the last bus back. So what happened was that the bus that we got, or it came to the bus stop. So the driver, we asked, both of us were from this part of India, that is Delhi and NCR. So two of the girls, it was 9 o'clock in the night, so we were desperately looking to go back to Adyar. And now we asked the bus driver that will it go to Adyar? So he just said Adyar, and he nodded like this. Okay. And for us, it was a little difficult to understand. We thought no, and we missed the bus. We didn't board the bus. Then the people who were we were them the how to go to Adyar and things. So they asked him, why did you leave that bus? He said, no, it's not going. So they said, yes, it is going. So it is the difference of the cultural aspects that we didn't know, that the nodding of the head matters. So whether it is a yes like this or a yes like this, we have to understand that. So let's get ahead. So when we're talking about our culture, it becomes like mine, me. And instead of me, it becomes, like something like, I keep on talking about something that has got a kind of a limitation in and around me. And as you can see the saying, a fish only discovers its need for water when it is no longer in it. Our own culture is like water to a fish. We live and breathe through it. So when we're talking about our culture, we are so much indulged into it. We are so much into it so that we are not able to look at something beyond it. So we live and breathe through it. So it's there with us. But a fish only discovers its need for water when it is out of it. So this is what we are going to talk through this lecture, a talk rather. So when we're talking about intercultural communication, so it is the process of sending and receiving messages between people, where the cultural background leads them to interpret verbal as well as non-verbal signs differently. Now, when we lack this, or when we have certain, barricades, or we have barriers, as we call it, so it can lead to insulting the others, and we have experienced. I think all of us have experienced this. Either it's the insult to me or to somebody else through me. So maybe many times the intentions are are correct. Sometimes I don't think that I meant it that way. And I always keep on saying that, hey, I didn't mean it that way, but why did you get insulted? This is where I'm talking about the water in which I was in, and when I came out of it, I didn't know how to react in the other waters, in the other culture. And that's how I, hurt the sentiments of the other. So what happens is that we keep on, saying that I didn't mean it. Or even if it is something that is verbal and non-verbal, all of us know what the difference between verbal and non-verbal. So verbals, we have to be very careful with our words, our speech, our way of punctuating, our way of pauses, our way of saying things, the semantics behind it, the syntactic functions that are in the sentence, everything. Likewise, we have to be very careful about our non-verbal communication. So what here we're going to do, I'm going to share a few examples, and through that we're going to talk about it. It's difficult to understand the other culture in the sense, like, if we are not open in our perspective. If we are open in our perspective, we broaden our views, then it becomes a little easier to understand the other cultures, isn't it? So when we're talking about the world today, it's becoming really, really vast, isn't it? So everybody is knowing everyone. Commuting has become so easy. So we are, in the morning, we're in one part of the globe. In the evening, we are in another part of the globe. So what happens is that we keep on expanding our experiences, our views, our ways, our way of looking at things. So it keeps on expanding all the time. But what can be difficult, however, is understanding of how to communicate effectively with the people or the individuals who speak something other than what I am speaking. It could be through the language, through the communications that we see, through the signposts that we see, through the other things that we have. So this is a slide I wanted to show you. I don't know whether it's visible when it is onto the smaller screen. So when we're talking about the comfort zone that we are in, so when we are cultivating our cross-cultural interactions, like if I am in culture A and I want to understand, or I have to communicate to somebody in the culture B, I have to move out of my comfort zone. I mean, by comfort zone, what do we mean by the comfort zone over here is not only or the culture that we're talking about. There have been many, many definitions of what is culture and how do you define culture. I'm not going into that. What we are bothered over here is that my culture could be not only limited to the house that I'm in, the workspace that I'm in, the region that I'm in, but it could be defined by where I am experiencing or where I am actually not only residing, but doing all my work, all my job. And it could not be only that I'm talking about the political boundaries over here. We are talking about the linguistic boundaries, we are talking about the cultural boundaries, we are talking about people who are in different cultures, maybe in just the next village that we have in and around us. So we have to cross that comfort zone to understand the culture. We have to cross that comfort zone to know the culture, to understand what's happening in that culture, so that when we are communicating with that particular person, we have an understanding of the culture. Now we cannot have the entire world to be known to us. We don't expect that, isn't it? But the comfort zone has to be looked at. So once we step out, one step out, we have a fear zone. We start finding excuses. We are affected by the opinions the others give us. ऐसे हो जाएगा, वैसे हो जाएगा, that kind of a thing. Or we have lack of self-confidence in ourselves. Once we cross over, step to the learning zone, we have crossed another milestone. We have just gone into the other phase. And it deals with challenges, so we have problems understanding it. We might have to acquire new things and new skills. And we try to extend the comfort zone that we were in, where we used to feel safe. Now we have to extend that up. Finally, we are into the growth zone. And into the growth zone, you come to understand about these interactions. And we are actually now observing and absorbing, as well as experiencing and expressing. All these things are going on. So when we're talking about culture, we're talking about, obviously, it has an effect. It has an effect on something that has, that really hits our realities. It's difficult to see own culture many a time because we're so much into it. It's very, very difficult to actually say, oh, this is my, to identify that this is my culture. It's too familiar, too ubiquitous to recognize. So the cultural assumptions are often hidden. Now, when it comes as a kind of a contrast, it becomes apparent. I'll give you an example over here. The university that I teach in right now is Shivnada University, and this is geographically located in Greater Noida, but it is at the outskirts of Greater Noida and almost touching a very small town called as Dadri. Now, in and around, people over there speak a blend of a language that is that they don't call it Haryanvi, but it is a blend of Braj and Haryanvi. So, and they are very hardworking people because they have really hard time fetching for water, and it's really hard for them to get the basic needs as well. Not about the money, but the resources that they have. So the language also is something that is not very soft and polite. So they're hardworking people. So what an SNU, Shivnada University, is a fully residential university. So the students who come in have to be residing all their 4 years. And what happens, why I'm giving you this detail is that the support staff, that is the guards, the helpers, the dining hall staff, whom they interact every day, they all are from the nearby villages. And SNU has got only 30% of the students are from Delhi NCR. 40% are from Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Kerala, and the rest are from the other states that we have, 28 states and UTs, and plus the NRI students. So what happens is, I'll just tell you one example, that when I went to one of my projects, it's just the nearby village, the nearest village you can say, and people from there, that village also come and work with us. So this guard who had taken me there at his house, so his mother was sitting at one of the charpais. So he just looked at her. He introduced me to his mother and said, "Amma, ये मेरे यहाँ साथ में हम काम करते हैं." And so, and then he turned around and to his mother and said, "Hey, buddy, roti chevle." So that was something, came as a shock, because to a mother, you don't speak like that in my so-called culture. You don't speak like that, isn't it? So I was in a shock. I said, "Why do you speak like that to her?" He said, "What? This is the norm. This is just like happening. What I have been like doing it since my childhood. And this is the norm here." So it was a kind of a contrast that came into my mind. And this is where the students also feel it, because they also talk to the students like when they have to ask them that, may I clean your room? So they won't say it out in such soft words. They would say, they won't say that, "May I clean your room?" They'll just say, "Oh, Baba, room saaf kar de," that kind of a thing, kind of a thing, with the tone, the intonation pattern, everything is what they have learned it since childhood. All of us know how the socio-cultural aspects work. That we have to understand. And when it is a contrast, we come to know, oh, there is something here. It's more visible when we encounter something that is foreigners, that is something that is very, very different from what we have been experiencing over here. And there's that kind of a thing has to be experienced. And when we visit other cultures, like we go out and start looking into the other cultures, quickly moving up. So when we have the click sounds from the Zulu language, how do you expect that if the person is trying to say, that means something's a word, and in my language, it's not a word, all right? So if I play this, I don't know whether it is, it's audible.
Ma'am, it's not audible to me. I don't know whether participants are able to listen to it.
Oh.
Yeah, it's not
I
audible,
think we can just skip it then. Anyway, so we can just skip it. I think it's not because it's because I have not shared the audio sound.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I should have this is something that I should have done it before you, Dr. Prakash.
Okay, it's okay, ma'am. No problem.
Anyway, I'm very sorry about it, the things that are...
No problem.
Okay, so we'll skip to the next slide. So we are actually recognizing cultural differences, isn't it? We are talking about certain aspects in the business as well, in the workplaces that we have. Everyone matters when we are talking about something that at the workplace that we have people who this is we're talking about the ways that people differ and how do we recognize them. And it's best to treat people the way they expect to be treated, of course, not at any individual's cost. So when we go to a place and there is a small little boy serving tea, maybe suppose we are having a meeting in one small little joint. I go to my field trips very often, and most of you must be also going for your field work. And in the small rural areas or in the suburbs, you have a dhaba and little boy comes up and you say, hey, Chotu. Now that Chotu is an insult, that little boy. He has a name or she has a name, that little boy or girl has got a name, Chaileo. So that's something that we are actually defying what what we mean to say and actually what we are saying it out over there. So when we're talking about the terms like ethnocentrism and xenophobia, that's an outcome of ethnocentrism. So we're just talking about something like what Summer had actually coined it out, that my culture is the best. And the moment I talk about my culture is the best, we are going to land up in trouble. We are going to talk about it in the view of something that is totally ignoring the modern mobility and multiculturality. We are not going to pay attention to these things. We are just thinking, and it is happening. It's not that it's not happening. The anthropocentrism is very much, unfortunately, present in the Indian scenario. There are various motives behind it, but still, it is present. So we have small little units, small little groups of people who are thinking in that terms, and then you have repercussions out of it, out of their actions. And that can lead to really a big conflict. So it's not only happening outside our workspace, it's happening inside our workspace as well. So when we're talking about me and the way I work, the way I experience, I should be sharing my experience with everybody. That is where the ethnocentrism, hits. And the moment we talk about me and myself, I am actually not giving weightage to the other person, isn't it? So it's very easy to say, hey, avoid ethnocentrism. But many times we are actually doing it. We are actually being very judgmental. We are being very much, like a person who is actually believing that I am superior to this particular person or this particular group, or my group is really of superior. We believe in certain aspects that these people don't believe into. And unknowingly, we may be hurting, or maybe knowingly, who knows? Many times it happens, where that we keep on hurting people by saying these things. Hey, तुम्हारे यहाँ ऐसा नहीं होता, मेरे यहाँ तो होता है, that kind of a thing, So that is ethnocentrism that's working in our workplace. We are creating hindrance. We are not only creating hindrance over here, but we are also creating a kind of a hindrance for ourselves, our self-growth and our learning. The other aspect, the other outcome of the ethnocentrism is xenophobia. Xenophobia is many times, where you are not very comfortable with the strangers and you don't want to mingle with the strangers. That also is something that is not, it is kind of we cannot say, it's not a disease, mind you, but it is a kind of a phobia that we have many times, and that could be cured. So it's not something that we should be avoiding it, but we should be confronting it out. So when we have to, the examples that I've taken in over here is cultivating cross-cultural interactions. So be aware that cultures may vary in what they consider humorous or taboo. Many times it happens, I think that it is good in my culture, but it may be something that may be a kind of a taboo in the other culture. So I'll come back to this when we are doing certain, the exercise at the end of the talk, when I would ask you the experiences. Have you experienced this? So ethnic humor is often perceived by many groups as evidence of racial prejudice. So happily using the words like, hey, black coffee is for the blacks. So that is something that is you are not thinking about it, but yes, it is giving a kind of a vibe, that is something hurting to the other person. You are giving rise to a racial prejudice, or you are actually doing that. Or there are certain taboos that are, like considered to be very much, I just, like something that you don't want to even talk about it, and you are asked to talk about it, like the menstrual cycles. So many of the women, they don't like, to be talking about even the word menstrual cycle. They'll say, hey, periods, my chubby, my body, so that kind of a thing. So really, like, if you don't want it to be announced it out, stop it. Don't do that. Or you can just ignore it out. Why do you want to, like, reform that person's saying into, like, you have to speak it out that way? So these are the things that, like, we'll have to look at it, and that's how we will be cultivating the interactions amongst us. And so even the second example over here is be aware of different rules for taking turns during conversations. Now, what happens is that some cultures frequently perceive breaking in into reinforce or disagree with another's point to be perfectly permissible, indeed desirable. So, what happens is when we are discussing, suppose, certain things, and we have got people from all across India, the formal discussion, suppose, is going on, and people from northeastern side, maybe from Assam or Meghalaya, you have people from Gujarat, Leh, we have in Madhya Pradesh, whatever it is, going on. Suddenly, what it might be, in a flow for a person, and I would ask, or I would think that I should be pausing, and then only the other person should begin. In some cultures, that is not permissible, or that is not seen as something that is good. So you're just breaking in with, if the person is, you just interrupt. So that is something in many cultures, it's thought to be very loud and not acceptable. And we keep on doing those things many times. Now, when we're talking about the scales of intercultural communication, I'll be a little faster into this because we have to, do a little more things over here. So communicating, persuading, evaluating, leading, deciding, disagreeing, trusting, and scheduling, all these things will just go very, very fast because we're talking about certain aspects that, talking about the cultural context. Now, when we're talking about the cultural context over here, we are looking at something that is a kind of a relative position of two cultures, and how do we actually look at those cultures, all right? So if you're looking at something that is how people decide on how the other is, actually looking at something that is from top down or consensual. So you can see on the slide, if we have the relative, the positioning that's there. So you have the countries that are written over here. So it shows in two directions. One is consensual, the other one is top down. So we're looking at the absolute position, whether I am looking at, say suppose Japan, Netherlands, and Germany, they look at the cultures in the relatively, we're talking about comparative structures that go on, and in India, Nigeria, China, so you're looking at something that is from top to bottom, how they view each other. So when we're talking about a good communicator, what is it? How do we actually talk about, continuing with the former one, how do you make a good communicator, or what makes a good communicator? Is it the speaker or the listener? Obviously, we're talking about something about the person who is speaking, and the listener is also working on the prior knowledge that they have. So when we're talking about something, how you relatively look at the culture, there are many miscommunications that happen. For example, in my son's MA class, master's class, there was a person from Netherlands, and there were two girls sitting behind, and there was a book kept on the front bench. And this boy from Netherlands was sitting there. And so this girl who was from the East Asia, she said that, please pass the book. Now this boy took the book and threw it at her, almost threw it at her. Now she got offended. The girl got offended. She said that, why did you throw the book? Why did you throw it? You shouldn't be throwing these things. He said, no, you said pass. And in Netherlands, people are very, very straightforward. They go by the words. So he went by the word pass. Pass means you can pass it on in any ways. All right. So what happens is it depends on how we are actually perceiving the things in the other culture. Things like, who's responsible for checking if the facts are accurate or right, the reader or the writer. This is another thing that we have to look in when we're reading the novels from, or say, suppose the stories from other cultures. Or there is a word called as maybe. The answers, like if you say, sir, would you be coming in? Would you be joining the meeting? You say maybe. Now, maybe can mean, like, in different cultures, different ways, different things, different meanings. Similarly, Indians, especially people who are on the Indian subcontinent, we just love adjectives and adverbs. And we keep on using them very much. Very, like, for every word we have an adjectives and adverbs. All of you who are from the linguistics area and literature would be understanding that. I've just put up an example over here. The scene was so much beautiful. Now this, so much is added over here. I can't even tell you. There were big, big mountains, and there were little houses at the foothills of them. It is not, I'm not talking about the linguistic construction, I'm not talking about the reduplication, I'm not talking over here about the syntactic insertions, I'm not talking anything about those things. I'm just talking about how the person is trying to put the expression, how excited the person is, how the person is trying to portray what the person is trying to, actually say it out. Is there a question or something? Somebody's mic is on, I think.
Participants, you're requested to please mute your microphones.
Okay. I thought there was a question or something. All right.
No, ma'am.
All right. So it was like, we are talking about something that if a person from the other countries, other than the Indian subcontinent, it becomes very difficult for them to understand the usage of so many adjectives and adverbs. And it happens, when we're writing our research papers, when we're writing our academic articles, the scholarly articles, that transfers into our writing as well. And we keep on using adjectives and adverbs where it is not required also. Not required as per the standard English. All right, or as per the requirement of that particular journal or where we have to publish it. But it's important to us in the sense the people who are actually saying it out, the people who are expressing it. It's very close to my heart. If I had a plain and simple sentence like the scene was beautiful, I can tell you how it was. There were big mountains and little houses at the foothills, and full stop. I'm not satisfied at all when I'm experiencing it. I'm not satisfied at all when I'm expressing it. I have to add these adjectives and adverbs, and the other person, if the person is from the Indian subcontinent, will understand. But the other people will have little trouble. So when we are actually communicating, we'll have to look into these matters, in these aspects, and then go forward. we talk about Hofstede. Hofstede developed certain societal values, and those are based on the low context and high context. And I think everybody knows it. I don't want to go into details about what is low context and high context, but we'll have to remind ourselves continuously that if a person belongs to the low context culture, the person is going to speak in shorter sentences. Shorter sentences, very precise. Choice of words will be very simple, but it will be very, very clear. The message that will be expressed would be expected to be understood by the usage of those economically used words. Repetition is appreciated because it is they have to clarify what they are saying. But people from the high context culture, they are using a lot of words, large sentences, long sentences rather, and it is a lot of things put into it. Like we have the adjectives and the adverbs that are put into it. So if you see the slide over here, so when we are communicating, India, as you can see, I don't have a marker here because it's not on the full screen. This is why I wanted to. So India is almost in the whole bunch of the what we have it over here, a whole bunch of countries over here. While on the left-hand side, if you see, you have US, Netherlands, Australia, Canada, Germany, Finland. Now these are the countries that have low context culture. So in lesser number of words, you have more of words that go in. More of meaning that goes in. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead. So when we're talking about the strategies that go in, the communication strategies in low context culture, we talk about the low context culture. They have to be clear, transparent, specific. We have to look into it if we are communicating with the people from the low context culture. We have to know exactly why are you calling, why are you talking, what is the exact thing that you want to pinpoint to talk about it. And at the end of the phone call, if it is a phone call, you say meeting, the recap, all main points, the decision. And we're talking about the formal ones. Decision made, steps to be taken, any responsibility that you have owned it, all the deadlines, everything has to be talked about it again, briefly. If you're not 100% sure of what you are being asked to do, state clearly. Otherwise, it becomes very problematic. So there's a difference over here. So what happened was that one of my, not bosses, but yes, somebody who was senior to me was from England, and that too from London. So whenever I used to, whenever we used to prepare any slides or we had to make a presentation, so I used to send her the presentation and she used to say, it's fine. Okay. And first two meetings, I used to take it as it's fine as something that, all right, for me, it is fine. But for the people from the England or England area, especially, I'm not talking about the Wales and Scotland. Fine means it is not enough or it's not very good. That means it needs corrections. And she was not very happy with it. So I had to understand that out a little, in a hard way, but yes, I learned it. So persuading, disagreeing in low context culture goes on based on direct communication style. We have to look at it that the arguments are presented first on the cards on the table and supported by the research or a particular evidence. Anything that has an evidence is supported because they have less of words. And so we are, suppose I have a meeting from, for example, if we hold this particular meeting and there are a lot of people who are the experts from UK or from Netherlands, I think I will have to be very careful when I am telling the person exactly what the person has to present. Okay, so we have to be very careful about all these things. Disagreement is deemed to be healthy and transparent, and is expected to lead to better solutions. So this disagreement is there, but you have to be very careful about it. If you disagree with what's being agreed upon, state your opinion clearly. Do not wait until after the meeting. So then and there, do it out. Be specific with yes or no. So what is the constructive criticism we have? This is all the perspective I'm talking about from our side, from the Indian subcontinent, okay? How do we give the feedback to you? How do you give the feedback to your boss? Like I told you, I faced the thing with my boss. She was senior to me, and I didn't know how to react to her fine. The next time also, she was not very happy. So the third time, I actually asked her, and that too, I had already suffered the 2 presentations, And she said, it's not enough, when I say fine doesn't mean that it's very good. That means you need to, put in a little more effort. But how do you give a feedback to your boss? That boss, you were not clear, or something of that sort. So I'm sure a lot of you must be having a lot of answers to this, and you must be having a lot of examples to this. So it is not only, if we're talking about the countries, it's not only the political boundaries that we're talking about here. We're talking about the people who are working from in our workplace from different areas. It could be a person who is from the Western Haryana who has a different background totally. And it might be that the person is too blunt and says it on face. Now that's their way of saying it out. Similarly, when we talk about what is the best way to share constructive criticism with your colleagues, so these are the questions that we have. When we're talking about constructive criticism, again, we are not hurting the other. We don't have to hurt the other. And for example, with the pronouns, tum, aap, Hindi has got 3. And when we're talking about the usage of these words, when we have to give a constructive criticism, it's not only about the content, but how we deliver it. How do we use the honorific terms, the pronouns along with it? So you'll have to look at tu, tum, aap, or in English, nowadays, when we're talking about giving examples, we are not using he or she. It's now obsolete in the sense we do not have to use he or she. Instead of that, they and their is an accepted norm, isn't it? So whenever we are trying to do a constructive criticism with the colleagues, with the boss, anybody, think of the words that we are using. And do we have, or do you have a preference of how feedback on your work should be shared with you? So all these things, when we're talking about certain aspects of communication, if I am sending something, I have to receive it as well, isn't it? So you can put in these aspects into your mind when we are talking about cultivating our intercultural communication. So you can straight away, or you can later on, so how would you get the feedback depends on you. Whether it is you can say, hey, did I speak well? Or the names that we have. So you can just directly ask, am I pronouncing your name properly? So that kind of a thing. Many times we don't have that repertoire. We don't know how to produce it. So it is always easier for us to be asking them instead of keeping it for the end. Evaluating is another aspect that is into the the low context culture as well, the high context culture, as you can see. So evaluating, that means direct negative feedback is given to all these countries like Russia, France, Italy. They expect it out and they won't feel bad about it. But in India, especially, but India is a very generalistic term over here because it's a huge country, and it differs in, like, the socio-political aspects make it even more complicated. And so you have, like the South India, the North India, the East India, the West India. So we have, like several aspects that go on in the workplace in India itself. So evaluating, as we can see, direct negative feedback is appreciated in some countries like Italy and US. You can see it's at the center, like almost. So it's again huge. You have many places. You have people who like direct negative feedback, or some people do not like it. Going forward, now these are certain questions that I had, so I'll just briefly go through it. We have, talked about it. So while discussing the negatives or the downgrade of words, instead of saying that, hey, it was a total disaster, we can amend it and say, it was a bit of disaster, we can just amend it a little. So you will have to, go a little soft on whatever we are talking about. And boss is a boss. So when talking about the subordinates and the boss, the relationship between the two, there are certain questions that we have to keep in the mind. And especially in these workstations at the workspaces that we have nowadays because of the world, is a melting pot now. So it is like, it is important for us to have a hand to have certain questions almost there in our mind. Who's going to ask what? How will the person feel? What if I'm in this person's shoes? How will I talk about it? Even if, so many times what happens is that the hierarchy and the age factor, so if there is a person who is very senior and is working under you, it becomes very difficult to give the if you have to talk about something negative, it becomes very, very difficult. Like, for example, in many places in India also, you call your boss by the first name. In US especially, you call it by the first name, while when you go to the Eastern countries, especially like India as well, you do not call the boss by the first name, isn't it? You have Mr. Sharma, or isn't it? So leading is another thing. We have hierarchical and egalitarian. So I'm not going into much of a detail over here. I've just wanted to talk about this, that there are, like the difference between the boss and the subordinate is very much there. So we have to be very, very careful about boss in the sense like somebody who is, working with you and has got a little higher, little or very high, whatever it is, the hierarchical structure. So you have to look at it from both the point of view, whether it is like democratic and libertarian, free ways of governance, or the hierarchical ways of governance. Okay, so when we're talking about the people in and around us, we have always faced, when I am, in a doubt, what should I do? So when you're talking about the cross-cultural aspects, if I have a doubt, I'd have to think about it if I'm copying the boss or not in the email. Because if it is not required, then why should I do it? If it is something that I should be talking about it or seeing it around the other mails, whether it's been copied or not, just for the sake of it, I should not. Should I use the first name or not writing the emails? When in doubt, address a person with a title in the first name and, go ahead with it. If you're not sure which culture you're working with, revert to the hierarchical communication rules. That's much, much safer. Trusting is another thing that girls has talked about. So we just, like when we talk about trust is based, like on something that is practicality of the situation. And in some of the countries, it just is based on task based, and the others are relationship based. So word of mouth that goes on. Hey, I've got a good relationship with this person, so I get this work done. Like you make it done that way. You're a team worker doing it out. So the main point is how you work with the team. And the other cultures, they believe in task based, so we'll have to look into it. So India lies into both, isn't it? Which context culture do you think India falls into? So in some parts of India, it is the low context culture. In some parts of India, it is high context culture. We'll have to just look into the behavioral pattern to find out this. Quickly, I'll move into the non-verbal communication. I think everybody is what non-verbal communication is. But I would just like to touch upon it because this is something that is very, very important, and I think it is very important for all of us, especially for the people who are into teaching or who are into the business or who are going to take up the business maybe. When we're talking about the cross-cultural communications, all these theories that we're going to talk about are merely not theories to be read, but actually we have these things that are working upon. We are actually experiencing those, and we are actually finding it out in and around us. So when we talk about proxemics, we talk about vocalics, that is paralinguistics, we talk about something that is the body language, that is the kinesics, or we talk about the touch, we talk about chronomics. We are actually talking about knowing the other and reacting in the way that the other wants to feel, or other would feel, how the other would feel. So I think this slide is something that's kind of a recap for everybody, that we absorb only 7% of what is said through the words. So WRDS words are just 7%. The rest of it, 55% is the body language and 38% is the tone. All right, the tone, the inflection, the ums, everything. It goes on. So how important it is. So when we're talking about proxemics, proxemics is a theory. So I'm not going to the theory of it. Let us talk about something that we do it every day. So this theory came into being when Hall saw it, and he said that just as animals use urine and physical posturing to define their territory, so do humans use personal space and concrete objects to establish their territory. Okay, so when we are using proxemics, I'm sure there are n number of examples at your workplace. It's not only the workplace but there are certain spaces where we keep on moving. So it is the canteen, suppose, or we have the cafe nowadays in the workspace areas, or the field trips that we do. So all these things matter to us because we are working over there, isn't it? So when we are interpreting a space, especially when we are actually using a communication over there, it matters a lot, isn't it? All of you will be agreeing to it. Like haptics, when we're talking about shaking hands. Shaking hands nowadays, COVID has given us a kind of a thing, space has to be really sort of, so physical distancing, when we're talking about the biological, touch, or when you have when you're waving it out, or saying, hey, or when we're talking about this, the waving of the hands, or the hug that we give, when you hug each other. So all these things fall into proxemics. And every person has got 4 feet of the space, or that's called as the personal space. Space is totally dependent on how the individual wants to use it. And that, I think every one of us would agree that individual and it has to be respected. For example, we have to know that, but there are differences. Uh, if you've been to Japan, you know this. I'm sure many of you must have been there. So in Japan, what happens is that people are, they have the tonal language, and they also read the lips. So what happens is they are very, like close to each other. When they're talking also to each other, they're very close to each other. Sorry, they are far apart from each other. They're not coming very closer, all right? So what happens is that when I, as an Indian, I go over there and just stand very close to a Japanese, the person might feel intimidated. While the person might feel a little uncomfortable. So we'll have to look at all these aspects where we are doing the proxemics, and that could be observed through the culture, through the people, through the environment, the ambience. That we can always do that. So we have a fixed, the types of space are fixed, semi-fixed or informal space. So we have to be very, very careful about there are certain fixed features that are there. Like, for example, what I talked about, the Japanese. The semi-fixed, that is it could be something that could be taken into account as okay, it could be sometimes, fluctuating this or that. So I might be using maybe a handshake, and the next time I'm doing a namaste, that kind of a thing. So the space is maintained. So types of distance is something that I think all of us are experiencing every day. Everyday life has got it. So intimate is something, the distance that it's very close to me, people who I allow. So this 4 feet of my space. So I allow you to hug me. I allow you to put a pat on my back. So the teachers also, when you are very happy with a student, will have to think about it whether the person would like it or not. Whether if you're putting a pat on the back, the person would like it or not. All right. So that is intimate. So when we talk about the personal distance, that is again when we're talking about something that is individual, and I, especially I, in the sense like me and myself, is into question. Social distance is all right. So people in the malls that we go nowadays, or in the canteen that we have, public distance, I know that all of us we are facing a difficulty over here with the COVID-19. So when we're talking about I've just put up a few examples, not from but not from just the proxemics, but the other communication aspects as well. So there are certain examples that we'll be touching upon. So we have stereotypicality in the language, and we have to accept it. We keep on doing that all the time, but we have to be aware of it and be really, really, it's like beware of it. There are certain words, images, and there are certain situations that, we keep on using it and hurting the others. Like, for example, why can't Mr. A ever be on time? I know, he's of that caste, no? He's from that religion, no? That is why. That kind of a thing. So that's a kind of a thing that we are generalizing it and we're doing it. And I've heard it in my workspace as well. So it is not only to the colleagues, but the people who belong to the other caste, class, in the hierarchy, maybe on the top of your hierarchical structure, or maybe working as a subordinate in your workspace. But we do that. There are certain qualifiers, and that also reinforces the racial and ethnic stereotypicalities. For example, The articulate XXX or the person implies that typically person XXS has low verbal skills. The articulate, the moment you say the articulate Dr. Chandra, that means I belong to a particular community, I belong to a race, caste, or religion where people do not have verbal skills. All right, so we have to be very, very careful about these words. Or when we say avoid racial identification except when it is essential to communication, for example, Judy, an outgoing person, is preferable to Judy, an outgoing XXX female student. That means of that race, caste, or religion, you mention it out. All right? So if you're not mentioning, it is something you're actually insulting it out. There are certain negative implications of color. And it is not, I'm telling you many times, it happens to people in and around us in India. It's not only the terms like black magic, black market can be offensive, but it could be something like the fair and lovely ads, the advertisements that go on, that if you are fair, then only you are beautiful. So those things have negative implications, like there are color symbolisms all across the advertising world. And it actually affects. My niece is very much, like her color complexion is almost very dark. So her skin is dark. And she keeps on talking to me and saying that, Masi, am I not beautiful? And she's just, like my niece is just 6-year-old. And she keeps on talking to me and saying that, Masi, am I not beautiful? They're saying that gori ho jaogi tab sundar hogi. So those things, like actually are there in the workspace as well. Unknowingly, if it is there in our mindset, it is like, it comes out. It's there when we are communicating to the people. Chronomics is something that we are talking about the time, isn't it? Time is being punctual. Time is respecting others' time as well. Time is something that actually talks about the willingness to interact and willingness to wait, willingness to complete your task on time, willingness to give the other person a lot of time. Like, for example, nowadays, there is a new term that has come into being. New term in the sense it might have been there. I came to it, know about it very, very recently. It's about the cultural abuse. Cultural abuse is totally ignoring the chronomics. You don't know where the person is and how the person is working. And what happens is in the cross-cultural communication, when we have the other person's culture might not be permitting the person to using a particular time set. Like, for example, if I have to do a puja in the morning where I have to go for namaz for 5 times, I am not doing some other work at that particular moment of time. I am letting the person go, as well as if I'm using it the time, I should be allowed to do so. That has to be respected. That has to be, I am actually trying to say myself, it's kind of auto suggestions going on that, hey, I am willing to wait for this person, let this person finish this particular task. And this is what is happening, especially in the digital world nowadays, the corporate abuse that is happening. So the bosses, we talked about, yes, boss. The bosses, the people who are in power in the sense of hierarchical structure, all of us, most of the time we say, hey, I want this file tomorrow. I want this particular work to be done tomorrow. At 5 p.m., it should be uploaded. So there are certain things, you have to be very careful about it. There are certain aspects in time that we have to be very, very careful about it. And when we're talking about the time perception, we have to be respecting the time. Suppose if the lecture hour begins at 5 in Japan, I'm taking a lot of examples from Japan and Korea as well. So in Japan, if it begins at 5, that means 5 p.m. That means by 4:45, all of them will be in the room, or they will be online if it is online, and they would have read the agenda of the meeting. The agenda of the meeting would have been totally understood and read by everybody in the meeting. That is respecting the time. That is talking about respecting the sense in their sense. While most of us in India, what we do, we will reach the time by 5, or we will be especially at 5, we will be switching it on, okay, that's not expected. Or some of us even join a little later than that, 5 or something. And then we'll start off by saying, hey, what is the agenda of the meeting? So that is what is there. It's not I'm saying that it is wrong. This is how it is perceived. If you're in Saudi Arabia, many of you must have visited Saudi. In Saudi Arabia, they'll begin the meeting by asking everybody how the person is. How are you? How's the child? How are people at home? But it doesn't happen in certain countries like Japan and Korea. They'll immediately go to the meeting, the agenda of the meeting. All right? So we are not saying that it is wrong. It is something that we have to respect. We have to look into, and that's how we are actually cultivating our interactions, the intercultural interactions. Next we talk about is kinesics, body posture. If you can see me, if I see like this, I'll just sit over there like this. I don't know whether my camera is visible or not because I can see myself here. Anybody can just tell me that?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay, thank you so much. So if I am sitting like this, crouching like that, and not at all interested, obviously that is kinesics. That's non-verbal communication saying that, hey, I'm not interested in giving this talk. The other thing is that interculturally, when we're talking about it, that is something that we have to actually look and think about it. So what happens is, when I am talking to a person, and I want to intimidate that person, I might just, stoop down near the face and start talking. The other person feels very, very intimidated and runs off. So that is haptics. And you are actually coming in that space, the person's space. And that is something that's not required. So we have to be very careful about our body postures, the way you enter into the room, the way the files are held in the hand. Kinesics also talks about how we hold. So if it is, suppose this is the business card, all right? So if this is my business card, what I'll do in India, we just take out from our purses, from our wallets, from our card holders, and we just hold it in one hand and give it, isn't it? But again, I'm taking an example from Japan and from China. So they will not give it to you with one hand, and they will not expect you also to receive it with one hand. So you receive it or you give it, both of things goes with two hands, all right? That way. So these are the little things that we have to be very careful about when we are actually talking about the cross-cultural communication, especially, and it is, very difficult to be talking about the Indian context. What happens is we can talk about foreign countries very easily. We can find it out like this. But the next door person might be belonging to the person who is just sitting next to me in my workplace must be belonging to a very different culture. And the gestures, the postures might not be very much comfortable, not making the person very comfortable. So we'll have to look into these aspects and, observe and express and experience. All these three go on, all right? But it's like, when we talk about something like a body posture that is like, I'm doing this, or I'm just like, doing it out, but it might be very easy for me to like scratch my ears. And if you go to certain areas, especially when I'm talking about Scotland, so like this is considered to be a very bad, gesture. It is something that you are not clean enough. So in some of our part of the countries, you may find it that way. Or like when you are blenching or burping, so the gestures is something, or yawn is something. So I used to talk to my students like yawn professionally. So when you're yawning in between, it is giving you kind of a wrong implications and indications maybe. So all these things come into, like when you're talking about the body movements, and it can be taken as symbolic or metaphorical in our social interaction. So it might be very unharmful if I'm yawning, like I don't even care about it in my culture if people yawn. But in the other culture, it might be that the person might be taking it as, or in a very formal business meeting, they will take it up that you're not, either you're bored or you're not taking the thing seriously. Both the ways, isn't it? Gestures are something that is very, very important. What is this? Can anybody answer if you can see me? What is this?
That's the sign of victory.
Okay, anybody else? Victory? Anything else? I can't see the chat box, so I don't know whether if you're writing in the chat box, I can't see the chat box. Anybody else? Two?
Right, sir. Okay.
Anything else? No? So if you're looking at, like something victory, that's fine. Or you can say that, like something of that sort of, I'm talking about two people, all right? But in an Aboriginal tribe of Australia, if you do this, they're going to sue you. They're going to take you to they're literally going to beat you up because this is considered to be a very, very vulgar sign. Okay, so we have to be very, very careful when we are actually interacting with the people from the other cultures. And I'm trying to tell this time and again, it is not only for the people who are from the, from the other countries, with political boundaries. We're talking for the people who are in India, the people who is next to you, the person who's sitting next to you might be having some problems with your gestures and postures. Quickly, because I just have little time, I think. So I'll just go ahead with a few examples over here. There were two friends, Sargam and Chohi. Chohi is a Korean name for a beautiful little girl. And Sargam and Chohi both of them were employees of a very, very prominent software industry in USA. And Sargam was from India, and she was not an American Indian, but an Indian from India. And Chohi was a migrant from Korea, staying there for a longer period of time than Sargam was. Both had done a project, and the project had been appreciated so much that the boss called up and congratulated them. So when Sargam and Chohi entered the cabin, the boss wanted to congratulate both of them. So she decided on something, and when Sargam and Chohi entered the cabin, boss's cabin, a lot of colleagues were already in boss's cabin. Both were being praised by their fellow team members, applauded, with claps and things like that, in front of the entire department. So everybody was happy. Chohi was staying in the US for almost 2 decades. She was usually very relaxed and smiled freely. But after listening to her praises, suddenly she became very serious and her beautiful smile disappeared. What happened? The boss noticed this change and turned the conversation elsewhere. Then, during the break, she asked Chohi if something was wrong. After all, her fellow teammates were praising her. Chohi was quiet, and the boss was listening to her emphatically. After a while, Chohi replied, "In my culture, we are extremely embarrassed to be praised in public." So what is rewarding in one culture may be a kind of a punishment in the other culture. So Sargam was very, very happy because in India, appreciation in public is a quite acceptable norm, isn't it? Similarly, it's the case with paralanguage. So when we're talking about paralanguage, we talk about the voice, intonation, pitch, pause, volume, stress, gestures, signals, anything. So you can be like, talking about enthusiasm, confidence, anxiety, or, like we're talking about the mental state the person is in. So when we're talking about the volume and the stress, so many of my colleagues, they find it very disturbing who come from different parts of India that in Delhi, the honking of the horns, like it's very loud. Like they have certain pockets in Delhi. They have their cars decorated with loud, like music and horns, and they have honking horns, like loud ones. So they keep on saying, why are they doing that? So it is, like that kind of a thing is of one culture, so they like it, they love it. Or when you have those Rajdut, not Rajdut bikes, I'm mistaken with one of the names. So those bikes that they have, pat, that goes on with loud music, sorry, loud noise. So it is something that is there in their culture, they like it. And in the other culture, you don't like it, so or it's not there in your culture, so you are like, having a kind of a contrast that we did. But both are acceptable in their culture. So when you are interacting with the other person, you can say, hey, how, like, Gawar are you? How, like, something of that sort. You can't say that. That is totally a no-no, isn't it? Especially in the workspaces. So quickly going ahead, you have cultivating, like when we're actually cultivating the cross-cultural interactions, we have to avoid certain connotations, that are racial or ethnic. So, like, for example, hey, he's culturally deprived, so don't, like, I can understand that. What about that? The person, like, for example, we went to, like, there were a few girls who were from the suburban areas and they had never seen the escalators. So when we were in Delhi, so there were two, three people who were actually laughing at them, and they were not, like even a whole, lending their hands to pull these girls up onto the escalator. They kept on laughing. Then the same group of girls, it's my, like, my experience. The same group of girls, we went to Mumbai. We were at X Roads. And the girls were still, like very hesitant in going up the escalator again. There were two boys. They just stopped over there, and then they said, "Ajo," and they just held their hand and they left them, like, lifted them onto the stairs and said, "See, so simple." And then they just walked off. So it is not. They didn't even wait for a thank you. So it is something that, like you're saying it out by laughing that she's culturally different, she doesn't have that kind of a thing. She's disadvantaged that she's never seen this escalator. How stupid you are. So we'll have to, like, look into our ways of communicating it out. Even in the offices, we do that, like the opening of the door or the faucet or the taps that we do. So there are several things that we unconsciously, like actually tell the person, keep on telling that you don't have it, so you don't, like you can't use it. That's something that you are actually hurting the person's sentiments. Or when you're having something rules for attentiveness during the conversation. So the eye contact that we have, like when we have the eye contact, cultures, they avoid it out. They don't have that eye contact. But in India, we say that उसने तो आँख भी नहीं मिलाई, बात भी नहीं करा ठीक से, isn't it? I don't know. Sorry for using Hindi in between, but I assume that that's another thing that we should not be doing it. So when we are talking about it, like so he didn't speak to me like that. He never. I couldn't see the eye contact. I couldn't see the person. So there are certain cultures where the eye contact is not considered a good thing. So they will lower their eye or look elsewhere and then talk. So it's okay. That's fine. So we'll have to be very, very aware of the rules and like something that is there in their, not rules, but it's the norm in the other culture. we have something, we have the flags as symbols, or the swastika that's put in, or the trigonometry that is hung on the as a charm, or there is a like broom and like something put on the as a lucky charm somewhere, or the parandis that are put on the bikes or on the trucks. Several things. You'll have to be very, very aware of what do they say and talk about in that particular culture. So they are thinking about it and then putting it across, isn't it? So we have certain sounds that go on, the vocal sounds like yeah, when I'm listening to it, yes, yes, yes. Or when I just said that, is somebody there, can you just tell me how it is, what is it called? So these are the things that we should be not take it for granted. If I'm talking one-on-one, I should be knowing that it is being understood by the listener. And that is something very important, because I take it quickly. I'll just take up one example from one of my field trips, or many of the field trips that I have. I'm a folklore collector, so I have lots of folk tales that the others speak, like I record it. So if in the folk tale there is a woman who is sitting and saying, ek dhora rahi, ek dhori rahi, that kind of a thing, like goes on. There will be somebody at the back saying, so dhora chala gaya. So that kind of a thing, it goes on. So it's not that if somebody is repeating after you, it's not that it's the person's intention of mocking you. It might be just that the person has got that in their culture. Or we have the vocal fillers like yeah, all right, like something so those things are very much, or the expression that we have, oh, ow, ouch, all these things, they are the vocalizations are very much culture specific, and we have to be very, very careful about it. I was just talking about this particular superstition that in the Buddha religion, there is a belief that the power of in the power of inflicting the evil eye and being able to change into a hyena. A number of inhabitants of Ethiopia, Sudan, Tanzania, and the Berbers of Morocco hold in this belief. And many a times, that is why the Africans, they lower their gaze, like the gaze, and they avoid the eye contact. So this might be the reason of doing it out. So quickly going into the example over here. So it says that the cultures may use different standards for loudness, speed of delivery, silence, attentiveness, and time to respond to the other's point. This is very important, especially in the workspace. So what is very much, like I can do it like this. Some people might be taking a little time. The speed of delivery is a little slower. The speed of saying it out or expressing it is much slower than expected by the boss or by the person who's given the task. Attentiveness is another thing. So other people might be very, very attentive and looking at you and saying, hey, yeah, so fine, I'm listening to it. Some people might be just yeah, okay, or just folding their, many times I've seen in my class as well, the students, they don't sit, properly, properly, and they just fold their feet and on the chair. It's perfectly fine, because it's in their culture it must be like that. And the conversation process, I have already talked about it, that in the Afro-American students, they do not like to be interrupted in between. So it is like something that you are actually rebuking them, or they're eavesdropping, you're just putting in the words. So let the conversation finish, there's a pause, and then you begin. All right, so there are two things over here. There is nothing like a globally accepted culture. Remember that. We are not here to see a global village over here in the sense of culture. We require knowing the culture. So each culture is different. There may be commonalities, but there are differences. And those are the differences that we have to respect. culture of regions. We're not talking about religion at all here. We're talking about the region, we're talking about the place where the person comes from, with those people, and we have to be very much talking to them, listening to them, understanding them, making them understand. We have to be observant. Everything has to be uh, thought of. And the rule, treat others as you want to be treated, does not apply here at all. So this is what I just wanted to, talk of. I wanted to share my views with all of you. And maybe culturally, there are certain aspects that I might have missed. And I would love to have certain examples that we could share over here. So, any examples that we have? Do you have any examples? Anybody would like to share an example over here? Anything? Someone? About cross-cultural communication that you have felt, you have gone through, you have thought of it. Like, for example, I'll just tell you that in the hills, if you go towards the mountain region anywhere, most of the time I've seen it because I used to be a very avid trekker, and especially in the mountains. So clapping and whistling is a sign of danger. That means they are awareing you of something. They are making you aware of certain dangers. It's not like something that the beauty that you are. No, they're not clapping on how brave you are, but on the signs of danger. They're actually talking about the signs of danger. Anybody who would like to share something over here?
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes, yeah. Hey.
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, I'm a Punjabi. So I have a friend who is from Palestine.
Okay.
So on my brother's wedding, he came here to Jalandhar. So, there is this lady Sangeet where we have this boliyan, if you have heard about it. So, yeah, so he was part of that. And in boliyan, Punjabis, they dedicate songs to all the people depending on their personalities. And along with that, we use, abusive language as well. So now that's part of our culture. But then initially he was asking what's happening. But then when we told him that, that's the part of our culture and don't take it literally. So after that, he was constantly enjoying. So what I feel is, I agree to everything, whatever you said, but what I feel is, as long as we don't harm anybody's feeling, this is what diversity is about. That every culture is different and it has its beauty, and we should rather learn and enjoy and experience these cultures, as long as we are not affected that way, that personally somebody is attacking on something which is very personal. I think it's beautiful as well. That's my personal opinion. Yes, ma'am.
Agree, Shivani.
Yeah, good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, I do have a point to make. Right, cross-culture communication. In Punjabi, Munda means groom.
Okay.
But in Telugu, it's a widow. And in Jharkhand, it's a surname.
Yes.
So we cannot say we have to enjoy it, but we have to be careful.
Exactly. And we do not have to close ourselves and limit ourselves. We have to be open to the environment that we are in, and open to, in the sense, we do not have to be xenophobic. We have to be what Shivani was also saying, that you have to accept and enjoy what we have. And you're talking about it, Mr. Srinivas, I can see your name over there. So Munda is a surname over there. It's not only a surname, but it's like a community that they have in Munda.
More politically influential.
Yes, they are. But there is a very, very nice community, actually. They are very vibrant and they've got beautiful folk dances, actually. And so the mundas that, like Punjabis will have a lot of problem if they are like, in Telugu, if it is munda, it means a widow. So, yeah, that's a beautiful point. You've given me a point, actually. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Yes, Aditya.
Yes, anybody else who would like to make a point, a question? Participants? Ma'am, yes, ma'am, you were speaking about how language is not soft and polite been teaching and in the neighborhood. How can we understand this notion of that the language is not soft and polite? As far as a person who is from Haryana, as soft as far as one's home is concerned, or a certain domain in which the person has been, using language as one's home. So may consider it to be polite from that particular person's perspective. It would be polite or soft, but when we listen to that person, we see that yes, it's not soft and polite. So
exactly.
How can we understand that notion better?
Okay, so the question is, yes, you have to be like, when we're talking about, let me just lower my volume because it's resounding. Yes.
Yes, Matar, you can go ahead.
I'm totally supporting Mr. Aditya Prakash point of view. Like my parents are also from Haryana and I am Punjabi. I was born in Punjab and Jalandhar only. So they speak Haryanvi language. So my friends and my colleagues, my schoolmates say like your parents are very rude. But I know like they are not rude, it's their language. So
yes.
Their question is very clear, like how to make people understand this, that this is their language, this is not their behavior.
See, there is like you cannot teach them all the time, isn't it? The point what Dr. Prakash was also making is, and what you have made, it's very relevant and it's very much like every day we are facing it out. And especially I told you in SNA we are facing this. But the thing is that we'll have, in the first day itself, during the orientation, we tell them. But it's not like, it doesn't register that until unless you actually experience it out. So it is something that, if something happens, you'll have to explain it out to the people. And most of the time what happens, Dr. Prakash, is that we realize it after a conflict has been made. Like a person gets into a kind of a conflict or with a guard or any other person. And then we tell them that, see, we have told you that this is how they speak. So it is not that, you have to be confronting the person, but you'll have to, accept that person. So the accepting is something that is very important. And that is, we do not do. We are not accepting it. We are just trying not to realize what the other person feels like or speaks like. We are just talking about our culture. We just try to throw it on the others as well. So the behaving of, you should be behaving the way I want myself to be, treated as. That's not done. It's not, we are small units and every culture is different. And that is what we have to respect. So I think that more we, have interactions, the more we move out of our culture, the more we have, the televisions have been, quite a, you can say a boon also, television and the radio in drawing, lessening these troubles actually. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Chandra, you are absolutely right. I think we are not trying to put ourselves in the other person's shoes or maybe trying to visualize how the other person from a certain culture has been in existence, has been using one's language in order to reciprocate one's culture. And, you spoke about, Dr. Chandra, observing and then absorbing, and then learning and then experiencing. So, Dr. Chandra, we thank you for sharing your life experiences in this expert talk, defining on the subtle aspects of cross-cultural communication. I hope our participants must have learned, gained, and enriched their experience listening to the lecture, listening to the talk, and they'll be able to use the notes from here and improvise their cross-cultural communication and in a better perspective. One more thing that I wanted to point out is what I was trying to recall as far as you spoke of xenophobia. So,
Yes.
as Uyghurs in China are concerned, the kind of a treatment that is being meted out to them, or people who are observing Judaism in Germany. So the kind of an inappropriate situation that they find themselves in when they simply are there with their slightly colored hair or maybe elongated nose. So for sure we need to be quite careful about these kind of situations and these kind of instances. So thank you, Dr. Chandra. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and it was an absolute pleasure to be talking to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Chandra. Thank you so much. Thank you.
May I take your leave then?
Sure, Dr. Chandra. Sure, for sure.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, each and every participant. Please, thank you, and respect the others. That's what we will be doing it from next time. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much.